My dad texted me at 2 a.m. Grab your sister and run. Don't trust your mother. So I did. The phone screen burned my eyes in the darkness. 3 sentences that made no sense until they made all the sense in the world. My father had been on a business trip in Seattle for 4 days, the kind of trip he took monthly for his consulting firm, always professional and predictable. He never texted after 10 o'clock at night, never used urgent language, never said anything that would alarm us. This message violated everything I knew about my careful, measured father, which meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. I was 17 and responsible enough to know when adults were overreacting versus when they were genuinely terrified. This text read like genuine terror compressed into 12 words. I threw off my blankets and grabbed clothes from the floor, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt while my brain tried to process what "don't trust your mother" could possibly mean. Mom was downstairs in the living room where I'd left her an hour ago, watching some crime documentary and drinking wine like she did most nights. Normal suburban mother behavior. Nothing threatening or suspicious. Except Dad wouldn't send this message without reason, and the specificity of grabbing my sister and running suggested immediate danger, not paranoid delusion. I shoved my feet into sneakers and grabbed my backpack, dumping out textbooks and replacing them with my laptop, phone charger, and the emergency cash I kept hidden in my desk drawer for reasons I'd never quite articulated. $300 in 20s that suddenly felt like the most important thing I owned. My sister Becca was 12 and slept like the dead, completely undisturbed by my frantic movement in the next room. I crept down the hallway and eased open her door, wincing when the hinges creaked. She was buried under blankets with just her dark hair visible, breathing in the steady rhythm of deep sleep. Waking her quietly would be nearly impossible, but waking her loudly would alert Mom downstairs, and Dad's message had been explicit about not trusting her. And I knelt beside Becca's bed and pressed my hand over her mouth before shaking her shoulder. Her eyes flew open in panic, and I felt her try to scream against my palm. I put my finger to my lips and whispered directly into her ear, barely audible even in the silent room. Dad sent an emergency message. "We need to leave right now without Mom knowing. I'll explain everything once we're safe, but you have to trust me and stay completely silent." Becca's eyes were huge with fear and confusion, but she nodded against my hand. I released her mouth and she sat up, reaching for her glasses on the nightstand. I'd already grabbed clothes from her closet, jeans and a hoodie, that I pressed into her hands while gesturing urgently for her to change. She pulled on the clothes over her pajamas, her hands shaking, and I stuffed her feet into the nearest shoes without bothering to tie the laces properly. The window in Becca's room faced the backyard and had a screen I'd removed dozens of times for sneaking out to meet friends. I popped it free with practiced ease and looked down at the 8-foot drop to the garden below. Not ideal, but manageable, especially with the flower bed providing softer landing than concrete. I threw both our backpacks out first, watching them land in the mulch, then helped Becca climb through the window frame. She hesitated at the edge, looking down at the drop with visible fear. I gripped her wrists and lowered her as far as I could reach before letting go, and she fell the remaining 4 feet with a muted thump that sounded explosively loud in the quiet night. I followed immediately after, dropping and rolling to absorb the impact, my ankle twisting slightly on landing but holding my weight when I stood. Becca was staring at me with questions written across her face, but I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back fence. We had maybe minutes before Mom checked on us or heard something suspicious. The fence was 6 feet of privacy wood that I scaled by stepping on the decorative crossbeam, pulling myself over the top and dropping into the neighbor's yard. Becca struggled more with the height, but I coached her through it, catching her when she dropped down beside me. We ran through 3 backyards before emerging onto a street 2 blocks from our house, both of us breathing hard. Only then did I pull out my phone and read Dad's message again, looking for details I'd missed in my panic. The timestamp showed 2:03 a.m., sent 7 minutes ago. No follow-up messages, no missed calls, just those 3 sentences hanging in digital space like a grenade. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. His professional, outgoing message incongruous with the emergency he'd declared. Becca was pulling on my sleeve, demanding explanations I didn't have, her voice rising toward panic. I showed her the text and watched her face go pale, even in the dim streetlight. What does he mean, do not trust Mom? What is happening? Becca asked, her voice full of fear. I do not know yet, I answered, doing my best to sound calm even though I had no idea what was really going on. Dad would never send something like that unless it was serious. Right now, we need to find somewhere safe and figure this out. The truth was, I did not have any real plan except getting us as far away from the house as possible. We were standing on a quiet neighborhood street at 2 o'clock in the morning with nowhere to go and no way to reach the one parent who had warned us to run. My phone suddenly vibrated with another message. This one was from Mom. Where are you girls? I heard noises upstairs. The message felt strange because it sounded so casual, almost like she was acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Then again, maybe from her point of view, nothing unusual had happened at all. Maybe Dad's text was the only thing out of place, and Mom had simply realized both of her daughters were gone. Even so, I could not stop thinking about those 12 words Dad had sent. The warning had been too specific, and now his phone was completely turned off. Before I could decide whether to answer, another message from Mom appeared. This is not funny. Come downstairs right now or I am calling the police. The threat did not make much sense to me. What was she going to tell the police? That her teenage daughters had walked out of the house during the night? We were not kidnapped, and we had not disappeared. We had left because our father warned us to. Unless she had another reason for wanting the police involved. Unless she was trying to force us back home before we learned whatever Dad was trying to protect us from. Becca quietly started crying beside me. They were the kind of frightened tears only a 12-year-old cries when her entire world suddenly falls apart in the middle of the night. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and kept us moving toward the 24-hour convenience store 3 blocks away. At least it would be bright, there would be other people around, and maybe that would give us a little safety while I figured out what to do next. My phone kept buzzing over and over as more messages from Mom came through. At first, she sounded confused, then angry, and finally threatening. The convenience store was almost empty. A bored clerk sat behind thick, bulletproof glass, staring down at his phone. Becca and I stayed near the refrigerators in the back, trying to look like we belonged there even though we were obviously 2 scared teenage girls wandering around at 2 o'clock in the morning. I called Dad again, but it went straight to voicemail just like before. His phone was definitely powered off. I tried sending him a text instead. I told him we had gotten out safely and begged him to tell me what was happening, because we did not know what to do. Before I could get any reply, my phone started ringing. Mom's name appeared on the screen. I watched it ring 3 times before finally answering and putting the call on speaker, so Becca could hear everything. Mom spoke with a voice that sounded tight, like she was barely holding herself together. Where are you? What is going on? I woke up and both of my daughters were gone. The windows are open and you are not answering my messages. Honey, you are scaring me. She honestly sounded frightened and confused. Nothing in her voice made her sound dangerous, but Dad's message kept repeating in my mind. It had sounded urgent and desperate enough to make us run. Dad texted us, I said carefully while watching Becca's reaction. He told us to leave the house and not to trust you. We need to know why he would say that." There was a long silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought the call had disconnected. Then Mom laughed. It was a dry, brittle laugh that instantly made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Your father sent you a message at 2 o'clock in the morning telling you to run away from me? That is ridiculous. He is in Seattle at a conference. He is probably drunk somewhere in a hotel bar and has no idea what he is saying." But that explanation did not fit the man I knew. I had never seen Dad drunk. Even at parties, he barely drank anything. More importantly, that message had not sounded like it came from someone who was drunk. It sounded like it came from someone who was terrified. Then why would he specifically tell us not to trust you? I asked. What did he think you were going to do? I could hear her breathing become faster. When she answered again, her voice had turned much colder. "Listen to me very carefully. Your father is having some kind of mental breakdown. For weeks, he has been acting paranoid, saying strange things and accusing me of things that never happened. I did not want you girls to worry, but he has been seeing a therapist because of his delusions. Whatever he texted you is part of that. You need to come home right now so we can deal with this together as a family." It sounded like a reasonable explanation, but the timing still did not make sense. If he had really been struggling for weeks, why would he suddenly send that warning tonight? Why would his phone be turned off immediately afterward? And why did Mom sound like she was acting worried instead of actually feeling worried? I looked over at Becca and could see the same uncertainty on her face. "I want to talk to Dad first," I said. "I need to hear him tell me that he is all right and that the message was a mistake. Then we will come home." I heard her sigh with frustration. A second later, I could hear footsteps and the sound of car keys moving. "Fine," she said. "Stay where you are. I will come pick you up. We will call your father together from the car and figure everything out. Where exactly are you?" Every instinct inside me told me not to answer that question. I could not risk giving her our location until I knew who was telling the truth. "We are staying at a friend's house," I lied. "We will come home after we have talked to Dad." I ended the call before Mom had the chance to say anything else, then immediately shut my phone off. Suddenly, I was convinced she might be able to track where we were. Without me saying a word, Becca powered off her phone too. We were thinking exactly the same way. By then, the convenience store clerk had started watching us with obvious suspicion, probably wondering if he should report 2 teenage girls acting nervous in his store at 2 o'clock in the morning. I grabbed 2 bottles of water and paid with cash, doing my best to look calm and ordinary. We had to keep moving, but I had no idea where we were supposed to go. Dad told us to run, but he never said where. He did not mention a safe place or give us the name of anyone we could trust. He only sent that warning. As we stepped outside, Becca suddenly grabbed my arm and pointed back down the street. A vehicle was creeping along with its headlights off, moving slowly, like whoever was driving was searching for someone. Even from a couple of blocks away, I recognized Mom's silver sport utility vehicle, the same one she drove to work at her real estate office and to our soccer practices. She was looking for us. Somehow she had figured out we were nearby. We quickly hid behind a parked truck and watched as her vehicle rolled past. I could clearly see her through the driver's window. The light from her phone lit up her face, and what I saw was not the expression of a frightened mother searching for her daughters. It was a look of cold focus and careful calculation. As soon as she disappeared around the corner, we ran the opposite way. We stayed low, using parked cars for cover, until we reached the next major intersection. There was a bus stop shelter there, and we ducked inside while I forced myself to think. Dad could not be reached. Mom was actively searching for us. We could not stay with friends because their parents would call Mom the second we showed up. We needed an adult who would actually hear the whole story before making assumptions, someone with authority who was not already connected to Mom. I switched my phone back on for a moment, and it instantly exploded with notifications. Almost all of them were from Mom, and each message sounded more desperate than the one before. Then I noticed one from a number I did not recognize. "This is Special Agent Rebecca Collins with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Your father instructed me to contact you if anything happened to him. Call this number immediately from a secure phone. Do not return home. Do not trust local police." I stared at the message over and over because it seemed impossible. I read it 3 times before I could believe what it actually said. If the Federal Bureau of Investigation was involved, this was far bigger than family problems. It meant Dad's warning was about something much more serious than an argument or a mental breakdown. Becca leaned over and read the message with me. The color drained from her face. "Why would Dad be working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation?" she whispered. "What did Mom do?" They were the exact questions racing through my own head. I used the payphone outside the convenience store to call the number because I was afraid someone might be tracking my cell phone. A woman answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded professional, alert, and completely awake despite the late hour. "Special Agent Reeves speaking. Who is this?" "My name is Megan Carter," I said. "You sent me a message about my father, Daniel Carter. He texted my sister and me tonight, telling us to leave our house and not trust our mother. We need to know what is happening." There was a brief pause. I heard keyboard keys clicking as though she was pulling up records or confirming my identity. "Your father has been assisting a federal investigation into financial crimes for the last 3 months," she finally said. "He uncovered evidence showing that your mother is involved in a complex fraud operation that launders money through her real estate business. We have been building the case carefully, but tonight our surveillance team lost contact with your father. The last thing we know he did was send that text message to you before his phone went offline." Her words hit me like a punch. I grabbed the payphone to keep myself steady. This was not just a marriage falling apart or parents keeping secrets from each other. Mom was the target of a federal criminal investigation. Dad had secretly been helping the Federal Bureau of Investigation collect evidence against his own wife, and something had happened tonight that forced him to send us that desperate warning. "Where is he now?" I asked. "Is he safe?" Agent Reeves hesitated before answering. "We do not know. He was supposed to check in from his hotel in Seattle 3 hours ago, but he never did. The last signal from his phone came from that hotel before it went completely dark. We already have agents responding there, but considering he missed his scheduled contact and sent you that message first, we believe he thought he was in immediate danger." Becca clutched my sleeve so tightly it hurt. She could only hear my side of the conversation, but every answer was making her more terrified. "What kind of danger?" I asked. "Why would Mom want to hurt him?" Even as the words left my mouth, memories started fitting together in ways they never had before. Mom disappearing for hours without explaining where she had been, the way she became defensive whenever Dad asked about money or business accounts, how she suddenly put passwords on every phone, computer, and tablet she owned. Agent Reeves answered quietly. "The people your mother has been working with are extremely dangerous. If they believe their operation has been exposed, they are not the kind of people who leave witnesses alive. If the people involved found out your father was helping our investigation, he would immediately become someone they needed to eliminate," Agent Reeves said. "And if they have already reached him, you and your sister could also be targets. You know his routines, and you might recognize people connected to the operation. That is why he told you to run." Hearing those words made everything feel terrifyingly real. I finally understood why Dad's message had been so direct and urgent. We were not escaping an ordinary family crisis. We were hiding from people who would kill to protect their crimes. "What are we supposed to do now?" I asked. "Where do we go?" Agent Reeves quickly gave me the address of a Federal Bureau of Investigation field office, about 30 miles north of where we were. "Get there as quickly as you can," she said. "Do not use your credit cards and do not turn your phones on except for emergency calls. If you see your mother or anyone acting suspiciously, call 911 immediately. I already have agents heading toward you, but they are about 45 minutes away. Until they arrive, stay hidden and keep moving." After the call ended, I told Becca everything Agent Reeves had said. I watched her expression change from confusion to disbelief, then to fear, and finally to quiet acceptance. At only 12 years old, she was trying to understand that our mother was under federal investigation, our father was missing and possibly dead, and we were being hunted by people who murdered witnesses. It was more than anyone should have to handle, especially a kid who had gone to bed worrying about homework and arguments with friends. Across the street was a small strip mall with a taxi company. We hurried over while constantly looking around for Mom's silver sport utility vehicle. The dispatcher looked exhausted, but he agreed to send a cab after asking where we needed to go. I purposely gave him an address 2 blocks away from the Federal Bureau of Investigation office because I no longer trusted giving anyone our exact destination. About 15 minutes later, an old, worn-out sedan pulled into the parking lot. The driver looked irritated that he had been called out so late for such a long trip. Becca and I climbed into the back seat, and I handed him cash before we even started driving. I asked him to stay off the main roads and take quieter streets if possible. He gave me a puzzled look, but accepted the money and pulled away without asking any more questions. We had been driving for only about 3 miles when bright headlights suddenly appeared behind us, closing the distance much faster than they should have. The driver noticed them in his mirror and muttered a curse before pressing harder on the gas pedal. "Someone has been behind us ever since we left," he said. "Probably a couple of drunk idiots messing around." I turned around to look through the rear window. My stomach dropped the instant I recognized the silver sport utility vehicle. It was Mom. She was close enough that I could clearly see her face through the windshield. She looked completely focused, determined. "That is our mother," I told the driver. "She is dangerous. You have to lose her." He looked at me like I had completely lost my mind. Then Mom slammed into the back of the taxi. The impact threw both Becca and me forward into the front seats. The driver yelled another curse and pushed the accelerator all the way down, but the old cab struggled to pick up speed. A second later, Mom rammed us again. We were driving along a quiet rural road with almost no traffic, the worst possible place for something like this. Mom suddenly pulled alongside us, and I could finally see her face clearly. I barely recognized the expression. She was not trying to stop us so we could talk. She was trying to force our taxi off the road. Her sport utility vehicle was much larger and heavier than the cab, and she kept smashing into the passenger side over and over. The driver was panicking now. He fought to keep control while swerving wildly across the road, but every hit made it harder. Becca was screaming beside me while I called 911, desperately trying to explain where we were and what was happening. The dispatcher kept asking me to slow down because I was talking too fast. Then Mom hit us one last time, even harder than before. The taxi spun around twice before sliding off the road and crashing into a shallow ditch. Even with our seat belts on, the force threw us violently around the inside of the car. My head slammed against the window so hard that bright flashes filled my vision. Mom stopped her vehicle nearby and climbed out immediately. I watched her walking straight toward our wrecked taxi with complete determination. The driver was slumped over the steering wheel, barely moving, and Becca was sobbing beside me. I grabbed her hand, kicked open the door on the opposite side of the taxi, and pulled her out with me. We scrambled into the drainage ditch running next to the road and started running through the darkness and thick brush. Behind us, Mom shouted loudly enough for us to hear every word. "Girls, stop. I'm trying to protect you. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is lying. Your father is lying. I just need to talk to you." But nothing she had done matched those words. Someone trying to protect us would not have chased us down and rammed our car off the road. The drainage ditch eventually led into a large culvert beneath the highway. We crawled through it on our hands and knees, coming out on the other side covered in mud and scratches. As we caught our breath, I heard sirens getting closer. The officers were finally responding to my 911 call. Mom must have heard them too because her shouting stopped. A second later, I heard her engine start, followed by the sound of tires squealing as she sped away. Police cars rushed onto the scene with flashing lights, and officers immediately spread out to search the area while others checked on the taxi driver, who was beginning to regain consciousness. Becca and I climbed out of the culvert with our hands raised high, yelling that we were the ones who had called 911 and that we were the victims. One officer cautiously walked toward us with one hand resting on his weapon, while another officer stayed behind to help the injured driver. I explained everything as fast as I could while Becca cried against my shoulder. The officer clearly looked doubtful at first, but his expression changed the moment I mentioned Special Agent Rebecca Collins by name and showed him the text message Dad had sent me. The officer's expression changed the second he saw the message. He immediately spoke into his radio using codes I did not understand, then told Becca and me to wait inside his patrol car while he confirmed our story. About 20 minutes later, several black sport utility vehicles pulled up. Federal agents stepped out, showed their badges to the local officers, and took custody of us. Agent Rebecca Collins was a woman in her 40s with sharp, observant eyes and the kind of expression that told me almost nothing could surprise her anymore. She wrapped emergency blankets around both of us before helping us into one of the vehicles. "Your father is alive," she said before anything else, and I felt a huge weight lift off my chest. "He was attacked in his hotel room tonight, but he managed to fight off the people who came after him and escape. He is now in protective custody, and the first thing he asked about was the two of you." She paused before continuing. "Your mother's associates failed to kill him, so they shifted their attention to you. They most likely wanted to use you and your sister as leverage to stop your father from testifying?" Becca broke down even harder after hearing that. She was crying from relief, exhaustion, and everything we had been through. "Where is Mom?" she asked. "Did you arrest her?" Agent Reeves slowly shook her head. "No, she escaped before local officers could take her into custody. Warrants have now been issued for attempted murder, assault, fraud, and numerous other charges. Every law enforcement agency in the state is looking for her, but she has proven she knows how to disappear when she wants to." The drive to the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office passed in a haze. I barely remember it because my mind was completely overwhelmed. Once we arrived, we went through security and were interviewed separately. Agents recorded every detail we could remember about the night, our mother's behavior, and everything that had happened. Someone brought us food, hot coffee, and clean blankets. Everyone treated us gently, almost as if they were afraid we might fall apart. Dad arrived just before sunrise. He looked worse than I had ever seen him. His face was covered with bruises, his left arm rested in a sling, and every movement looked painful, like even breathing hurt. But the moment he saw us sitting in the conference room, he completely lost his composure. He wrapped both of us in a careful hug, trying not to hurt his own injuries, while Becca buried her face against his chest and sobbed. "I am so sorry," he kept repeating. "I'm so sorry I put both of you through this. I thought I could handle everything quietly. I thought I could protect you." Over the next several hours, we finally learned the entire truth. Mom had spent the last 5 years running a real estate fraud operation. She had been using her business to help a criminal organization launder money. Dad had uncovered the evidence by accident after finding communications that proved she was not simply involved, but was actually one of the key people running the operation. Instead of confronting her, he secretly contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation. For 3 months, he pretended everything at home was normal while quietly collecting evidence against her. Earlier that night, someone inside the investigation had leaked information about Dad's cooperation. Mom's associates learned he was helping the Federal Bureau of Investigation and immediately sent people to his hotel room to eliminate him before he could testify. Dad had already been expecting something like that. He had added extra locks to his hotel room and prepared an escape plan just in case. He managed to fight off the attackers and get away, but before disappearing, he sent us that text message because he knew that if they came after him, we would be next. "She was never planning to kill you herself," Dad explained in a tired, raspy voice. "She wanted to get to you before the Federal Bureau of Investigation did. She planned to use you as leverage to force me into staying quiet. But when you ran instead of coming home, she panicked. The person chasing you tonight was not a mother trying to protect her daughters. She was a criminal trying to protect everything she had built, no matter who got hurt." The trial finally began 8 months later. Mom was captured near the Canadian border while trying to escape with fake identification papers and a large amount of cash. By then, the evidence collected by Dad and the Federal Bureau of Investigation was overwhelming. They had years of financial records, messages, and documents proving a massive money laundering and fraud operation involving millions of dollars. 17 people were charged as part of the conspiracy, but Mom received the harshest sentence of anyone involved. She was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, and numerous additional crimes. The prosecutor spent nearly 10 minutes reading every charge aloud in court. Throughout the entire trial, she never once looked at Becca or me. She never apologized, never showed any regret, and never tried to explain herself. As I watched her sitting at the defense table, I realized the woman wearing my mother's face was someone I had never truly known. We had lived beside a criminal our entire lives without ever realizing it. Dad testified for 2 full days. Even though the emotional pain was obvious, his voice never wavered. He told the jury how he had fallen in love with a woman who had never really existed. Someone who had spent years pretending to be a completely different person. Today, Becca and I live with Dad in another state under partial witness protection. We did not receive new names or completely new identities, but enough security measures were put in place that we can finally sleep without waking up terrified by memories of a sport utility vehicle trying to force us off the road. Both of us continue going to therapy as we work through everything that happened. Learning to trust people again has been one of the hardest parts after discovering that the person we believed would always protect us had been living a lie. Dad is rebuilding his consulting business one step at a time, and he still struggles with guilt. He blames himself for not recognizing the warning signs sooner, and for exposing us to dangers he never imagined existed. Looking back now, I still think about that text message that changed our lives forever. If Dad had waited even a few more minutes, Becca and I probably never would have made it out of that house alive.